This lesson for the Cornet Project class will demonstrate how the smallest spot of all became Reformed theology's largest blind spot. However, the King James Version noticed it. I thought that was somewhat ironic since the King James Version is sometimes just absolutely rejected or mocked or set aside. But in this case, it's noteworthy to notice the spot, that spot there, that little dot, that represents aorist tense, simple form of action, and we'll proceed from there. And what we have now is present tense, continuous action, aorist tense, punctular action. That's that spot. I'll call it spot the whole time rather than a dot, but it's a spot. And perfect tense is the past completed action with present continuing results. So here's the text in John 20:31, King James Version demonstrates the use of both the finite verb believe and the participle believing. Believe is aorist, and believe is aorist finite verb, and believing is a present active participle. But these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. Notice fathered is between believe, finite verb, and as one who is believing, gerundive noun. You say, well, I don't see that. Well, it's in 1 John 5:1, the same author mentioned in 1 John 5:1 that everyone who is believing that Jesus is the Christ, King James has believeth, and believeth is used for both believing and believe. So they have believeth that Jesus is the Christ, has been born out from God or begotten. It's fathered. It's perfect tense. So prior to believing, that is being a believer, and subsequent to believe, the finite verb, is where we're fathered. So in that very moment you believe, which is what the Gospel of John was written and why it's on record, all those miracles used to persuade and their contextualized narratives were there and written, that good news about Jesus, so that these particular ones were selected, Holy Spirit inspired, arranged so that we might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And then as a believing one, one who is believing, we may have life through his name. So the only thing that defines a person who is believing, a believing one, is that somewhere, persuaded by the gospel, they believed Jesus Christ for everlasting life. They believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that's as presented in the Gospel of John. So fascinating as that is, blind spot bias is a cognitive bias that occurs when individuals are unable to recognize their own cognitive biases, and usually that's becomes significant. It'll cause a significant impact on group decision making, overlooking important information like not noticing the aorist simple action or ignoring that, and then trying to make too much out of the participle, not noticing it's a gerundive noun, and that one who is believing doesn't mean they won't stop the action of believing. We have an account of that in Luke chapter 8, and it was because of the circumstances. We have people in the Bible who would not confess outwardly Jesus because of their fear or their interest in the opinion or praise of men rather than the praise of God. Others were secret disciples. So at no time are the circumstances justifiable to stop believing or not confess outwardly, acknowledge Jesus. And at other times, it's an indictment against religionists or political powers who intimidate and threaten people, so believers have to go into hiding, be in secrecy, or are discouraged and stop believing, which is a verb, which in Luke's gospel, it was referring to their fruit production, that engaging, those people who had already believed and had believed, were believing for a season, and that season was cut off. And of course, Timothy was admonished as a pastor to be ready in a good season and in a bad season to preach. Groupthink is a phenomenon of groupthink focused on maintaining consensus, avoiding conflict. So when you're in your group, you go along with the group, even if you're among Calvinists. You, let's say, are trained in a Calvinist school by Calvinist professors. You come out a Calvinist, you write papers to support Calvinism, and of course, a consensus builds. Things are ignored, biases take over, groupthink is in play, and blind spots occur. This echo chamber occurs when group members only seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs, confirmation bias. I'm just looking for proof text for that which I've already presumed or assumed, rather than actively seeking out dissenting opinions or alternative perspectives. This is why the term depravity that's used by Calvinists and Arminians has no lexical definition. So you don't have to take Calvinism or Arminianism that seriously because in many ways they don't. They don't even evaluate it in light of the Bible, lexicography, hermeneutics, and things like that. So this is why individuals are excluded who have different perspectives. This is when individuals are unable to recognize their own biases. They may inadvertently exclude individuals with different perspectives. So we don't want someone to come in and shed light on, let's say, the emphasis lexical morphemes might bring in Koine Greek, kind of action, or is it a finite verb, or is that a noun? That may disrupt the advantage the text might have had for supporting my bias or supporting my conclusion that was according to, let's say, an assumption. 1 John 5, 1a, for example, the one who's believing that Jesus is the Christ is out from God, has been fathered, is always being fathered. That's a present active participle in the text. Gerundive noun. What's happened here in this, according to blind spot bias, even the New King James Version placed who believes. You can read this here and you can see the Greek part is not what's in the actual Greek text of any kind. So it's not a matter of are you using the TR, the Stephanus 1550, or Beza, or are you using the Nestle Aland or any of that? It's not in any of them, which is remarkable. 1 John 5, 1a in the New King James Version, whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. It does not say has been, does not show perfect tense there. It does not show whoever is believing. It uses the aorist tense, and why, I don't know, because we have computers. But it's a demonstration of translators' bias toward a simple form of action that would invite credulity to the notion that regeneration precedes faith. That is the idea. If you use puncture action here, then there's no simple form of action, no spot, no point of action in the past, that moment where a person would have believed before we would then call them a believing one. A blind spot bias would have us to believe that prior to the simple form of action, that's a finite verb, aorist tense, that one has been regenerated prior to that simple form of action. Not even one text in the Koine Greek, regardless of the TR, the morphological Greek New Testament, Nestle Aland, whatever else is out there, it's not there. Not even one places the finite verb generate or regenerate prior to the finite verb believe. 1 John 5:1 does not say that prior to the act to believe he or she has been previously fathered. Here's a conclusion that there's no life outside of Jesus Christ. We know that. He's the way, the truth, and the life. The Koine Greek text demonstrates in Galatians 2:16 that it is the good news that no kind of man is being justified out from any kind of works of any kind of law except through Jesus Christ's faithfulness. Just like Christ's righteousness is mentioned in Romans 3, that's the righteousness imputed to us when we believe, simple form of action. And Paul had said that as one who had noticed this good news, even he believed into Jesus Christ, simple form of action. He was pointing back to that past point in time, that little spot, that moment, not ongoing action, in order that he might be justified out from Jesus Christ's faithfulness. Jesus Christ's faithfulness, that's a subjective possessive genitive. It's exclusively the faithfulness of Jesus Christ. There are those bantering between faith and faithfulness, trying to say that a person has to achieve some degree or extent of faithfulness in order to achieve some final standing before God, final salvation or ultimate justification, and that's couldn't be farther from the text. So you have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson, but I do find it personally quite ironic that it's the King James Bible, John chapter 20, verse 31, that establishes the finite verb, that point, that spot, that moment where a person believes. And then in that moment, they're born again. And then from that moment of being fathered and always being fathered, they can always be called the one who's believing, and nothing will change that. Even when they stop the action, the verb believing, they're always the believer. So once a believer, always a believer. Have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson.